Good job. Good evening, everyone. It is 5:30 p.m. I'll now call this meeting of the Charles City Community School District School Board to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
President Hebert.
Here.
Vice President Mack.
Here.
Board Member Dr. Stroh.
Here.
Board Member Fox. Here. Board Member Yeager. Here.
Good. We'll move on to the reading of the district missions and vision statement. Josh, please.
One second, I don't have it right in front of me. Put it on the agenda, but it's not, so.
Oh, yeah, remember?
Well, I have parts of this, but I don't have it all. Our mission: to challenge all students to achieve their full potential through engaging, responsive educational experiences that inspire innovation, critical thinking, and collaboration. Our vision: to develop learners who are confident, compassionate problem solvers.
Thank you, Josh. And I'll move on and take a motion for approval or amendment to the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
And properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Welcome all of you. I will now take public comment and we will start with Cassandra Michael.
Good evening, board. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. While there are lots of things that I would like to address, unfortunately, my time is limited, and I know that I'm going to do my best to keep this short and sweet. I'm here to respectfully request your consideration for open enrollment for my children into another district. I want to clearly outline my understanding of the process and the steps, the transparency, and compliance with that process, please. So after reaching out to Sarah Nickel at the state level, wanting to know what my options were, knowing that the deadline had passed of March 1st, she informed me that it was still an option, that it would just be considered a late file. She said oftentimes it looks better when you're able to have one of those just cause boxes checked on the application, but said that it was not necessarily required. And her recommendation, after listening to my spiel, if you will, about what situation I was in, had said that to come to the board, because ultimately it could be decided that the students could still be open enrolled. I'm also under the understanding that my youngest son, who will be entering kindergarten, the deadline has not passed. It is actually September 1st for him. So there are only 2 of the 3 students that I'm asking to open enroll that would fall into this classification of a late file with no just cause. That said, I have already made my case ultimately through 2 correspondences that I have sent to you guys as a board. One outlining the overall concerns that I have for the district, as well as the concerns directly related to open enrollment. Now, while I am requesting open enrollment for children that are biologically mine, I still have children in this district. I remain personally and financially committed to this district because obviously being within district, this is where my tax dollars are going. I sincerely hope that we can get the district back to the once strong and supportive place that it once was. But right now, I have lost all faith, unfortunately, in the leadership and the direction that things are going right now. And since removed myself from the situation and now doing the best I can to remove my students from that, my personal students from that situation. This decision has not come lightly for me. As both a parent and a formal loyal employee to this district, I really hope that you will consider the information that I have provided to you. And that we can move forward with the open enrollment for the well-being of my personal children.
We'll now move on to Jeremy Parrott.
Evening. So I wrote a letter to you guys a couple weeks ago. I have two of them. One was a formal letter with the paperwork. The other was a less formal, making you aware that this was coming. That letter and those two letters were explaining exactly why we're here to seek release for my daughter Sophia to go to school and participate in sports in St. Edgar. So tonight, I'm not here to point fingers. I'm not gonna name names. You all know who's involved in this situation. I hope that you ask questions. I didn't hear from any one of you. I was a little bit surprised by that. I guess it, hopefully my letter was clear enough to answer all those questions. So we have 6 kids. We have 4 kids still in the school district. 5 if you count Sophia, who's going to summer school. So 4 of the kids are still coming up through. So we haven't abandoned Charles City. You know, we came here 10 years ago. We have been coaches. I've coached some of your kids, had babies here in some of your hospitals. And so we do consider ourselves part of the Charles City School. The problem is that we didn't enroll early enough because we were trying to solve the problem. And that is really why I'm asking you today to look beyond whatever the paperwork says and say, okay, this is a family that is committed to the school. We have done everything right in that we took it to the coach, we took it to the athletic director, we've gone through every step. And if we would have bailed in March just to meet the timeline, I would argue that that is not a team play. That's not what would be representative of a community. So tonight, you guys have an opportunity to, I guess, vote on that. All full disclosure, it will make no difference whether you say yes or no. We already have an apartment. My wife's already moved on paper. We already have licenses that are in St. Edgar School and registered for voting in St. Edgar schools. So she's going there and there's really nothing you guys can do about it, okay? I, with all due respect to everyone I spoke with, the timeline wasn't met, okay? And there's been deficiencies, as you know, that I wrote in the letter that weren't taken care of, okay? I still have 4 kids in the school. So the question is, are you guys gonna help us? Or are you gonna make us go through with renting an apartment, with breaking the family up and making sure we sleep there every night just so my daughter can go to school and play volleyball? I was hoping that this would be more of a Q&A. That's what I asked for specifically, I guess. So I'll be waiting until the end of this if you have any questions. I'm just very concerned and interested in your answer. Yeah, and I'll be available for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. We'll now move on to Jim Lumberg.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Lundberg. I'm a resident of this school district and a retired educator, having had the privilege of teaching at Charles City High School for 40 years. I want to take a moment to thank the school board for their ongoing dedication to serving our students and community. Your leadership and commitment play a vital role in shaping the future of our schools. I'd also like to express my sincere appreciation to Dr. Burnite and his administrative team for their thoughtful guidance as we consider much needed updates for our high school facilities. Your focus on what's best for students, faculty, and the broader community is deeply valued. Additionally, I've been very impressed with the work of FEH Design. Their willingness to listen, collaborate, and develop solutions that closely align with the needs of our district while remaining fiscally responsible has been outstanding. With all that being said, I believe that we are at a crucial point in time to move this project forward. I truly believe the plan you've put together is both practical and feasible, something we can take to the community with confidence. With an organized effort to inform the public about why this project is so important right now and how you work to keep it as cost effective as possible, I believe this vision can become a reality. But to make it happen, we need strong and united support from the Board of Education. I also want to encourage our community to get involved. This project isn't just about the school. It's about investing in the future of our students and the entire community. We need everyone's voice, support, and engagement to make this happen. Whether it's attending meetings, sharing the importance of this project, or voicing support to the board, every action helps us move closer to successful outcome. Once again, thank you all for your hard work and dedication. I respectfully encourage you to please vote yes for our school, our students, and our community. Thank you.
That's all I have on my sheet. Is there anyone else in the crowd that'd like to make public comment this evening? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone else in the crowd that would like to make public comment this evening? Very good. We'll move on to approval or the amendment of the consent agenda, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We can move on to the administrator and director report. Dr. Bernard, you're first.
So I wanted to just talk about the Cosmic Snowball team that went to Massachusetts and represented Charles City really well. They competed on the world stage in Boston and finished 24th place out of 104 competing teams. And those teams all were in the top 5 in their own state competitions. They had their season high score, 425 points. So that was exponentially better than some of their earlier runs. So they kept growing up until the end and really did a great job. My next topic, any interested community members, we will be hosting a bond campaign meeting with FEH on July 9th in the high school library at 4:30. I have about 67 names on my list right now, and I'll be pushing out communication to people that are interested in being a part of the campaign process. And so I'm just waiting to determine what direction the board takes tonight before pushing that communication out with everybody. So I look forward to that meeting. So those were a couple things.
We'll move on to board committee reports that we have.
No, we were gonna meet with SiAC last week, but that was canceled or postponed due to weather.
Very good. Move on to new business action items. We'll start with open enrollment. We have here the recommendation, the board is to deny due to lack of valid circumstances not indicated on the indication. At this point, if anybody would like to engage with either of the families, you're open to do so. So if you have questions, if you have further questions, you can make a comment here. Otherwise, I will take a motion.
You heard.
Please know, we'll amend that.
So
Recommend
Henry,
for the kid.
Yeah, well,
Henry, my list.
right, yeah, up until September.
I'll make a motion for the open enrollment out as amended.
I'll second.
That's for the amendment, correct?
You're seconding it.
You're seconding, You're motioning for the amendment of striking Henry from this?
Yeah.
Good. Been probably moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote on that amendment. All those in favor, state aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. We're now on to a motion for the open enrollment itself for the remaining.
I'll make a motion for the open enrollment all as present or as amended.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
So, the proper procedures.
Basically, everyone submitted the proper paperwork. And then none of the indicators were checked, so.
It's been properly moved and seconded to go with the recommended statement here of denial. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We can now move on to the Piper Sandler bonding house.
Evening, my name is Tim Oswald. We visited the 6 or so months ago about sales tax borrowings, and I don't intend to rehash what we went over at that time, but move forward with some additional discussion. And you have in your packet the presentation. The discussion at hand is voting general obligation bonds. And then kind of how do we stage phase one and phase two of these projects funding wise. Yeah, to implement them and try and stay within all of the various departments. Would everybody agree with that? So a couple of business points first. The only day you can vote is the November regular election. So to get on that ballot means we have to have the petition and board action, and I think it's around the end of August or something for this year to get on this year's November ballot. Statute says that you can vote one ballot question as long as the tax rate on the bond does not exceed $2.07. The statute further says that that bond has to be paid within no longer than 20 years of when it was issued. There's a critical point there to make sure that understands when it was issued. Statute does not say you have to sell all of the bonds on any given day, date, whatever. And it's quite common that bonds are staged over 1, 2, 3 year period of time, such that they can be spent when the proceeds can be spent as when construction is going on. Doing okay so far? So the assumption I'm making is that you'll probably end up having to stage a bond where you'd sell part of it in 1 year and another part a year later. I should pause here and mention that other than having seen FEH's numbers, we've had no correspondence back and forth, and I wanted to keep it separate so they, at this stage, they do what they do and we do what we do. The next exercise is for us to come together and try and figure out how the math on borrowing lines up with how they'll design, bid, let, construct the project, and we've done none of that, and we'll get to that in a second. Right? Okay, so you can sell bonds in 2026, you can sell them in 2027, and each of those can go for a 20-year period. So the practical reality is you can borrow for 21 or 22 budget cycles with this project. Does that make sense, everybody? So when we vote based, when you levy the tax to do the budget, you'll levy the tax based on the property value that was certified as of the 1st of January. Now then you're going to vote if you choose to. You'll vote in November. There's nothing we can do to change the FY25-26 budget. Previously certified it, taxes are levied, we're done. So the first time this would come up would be the FY26-27 budget. And that's when you need to tax block right to come onto the tax rolls. Well, we don't know what the FY26-27 property value will be. Right, it won't be released until January. late December or something like that. So what we do is we typically say, you can draw some conclusions from past history. You know, the district's property values have gone up a little bit less than 3% a year, average. So we take the property value that you're currently budgeting off of for FY 26 budget. At 3%, or if we're gonna do it over 2 cycles, we add 3% twice to the property value in order to calculate what the $2.70 produces. Okay,
I have a question for you.
shoot, please.
So, in your example, the bond issuance, like we were successful in going forward, we wouldn't be able to make any selling of bonds until fiscal year 26.
I didn't, if I said that, I apologize.
No, you didn't. That's
what
fine.
10.
Yeah.
You'll sell the bonds when you're ready to sell the bonds to pay the costs associated with the project. We can't have a payment on bonds, interest, until FY 27.
Okay.
So if you vote in November, let's humor it, let's say we hurried and sold the bonds in December. First payment could not be June of 26, it would have to be December of 26 or June 27, because that's the next budget. Does that help?
Yep, that answers the question. And then, you mentioned $2.70. That's the maximum amount.
Yeah,
We could do it anytime during that 20 years. Is that correct?
correct. So hold that thought.
Okay.
So great question. The statute goes on to say that if you're going to levy more than $2.70, you can ask the voters for permission to do so. And then you can go up to $4.05. That's a second ballot question. It's another 60% yes vote. So the first ballot question, I'm going to joke with it. First ballot question says, can we do this? Second ballot question says, no, I mean it, can we do this? But no, it really says, can we levy the taxes to do what we just approved? That causes some confusion with voters, et cetera. So a lot of districts, the 405 permission is permanent. It's not project specific. Once you have it, you have it. So you'll be organized. But the 270 sometimes is easier for people to kind of grasp for those that don't have the authority. Does that make sense? There's one ballot question, and the ballot question says, can we sell, and I'm going to say 30 million, just for example, can we sell 30 million of school bonds to construct additions, remodel, renovate, et cetera, those bonds. Doing okay? Okay, so I did note in the, that we're using, in my typo, one of my first typos is that we're using the FY 27, it says on the first page. We're using the FY 28 estimated property value, so we're using not 1 year, but 2 years of estimated valuation increase within to get to the 30 million. So the second page then is just the payments, just to kind of illustrate the math. Bond 1, 10 million sold in the spring of 26, bond 2, 18 million sold in the spring of 27, and then bond 3 in 2028. The spring of is intended to tie these things to when you're regularly approving your budget. Do a lot of school bond sales in March, April, May, because that's when you're also doing budget work. Shoot.
Does it make any difference when we do the sale? Like, is it financially lower interest rates during that time because everybody's doing it, or we offered them in September when no one else is doing it, we get a better rate?
So ignoring market movement from day to day, if I could delay things till June or July, the largest payoff months of the year in bond industry are June 1 and July 1. So sometime, and so that means everybody who owns bonds is getting cash June 1 or July 1, interest and principal redemptions, and they need to redeploy that cash, buying bonds. If I lived in a vacuum, everything else irrelevant, I'd say we'd sell bonds the first week of June, first week of July, something like that. First week of July is a problem. We have a holiday. And so first week of June makes some sense. We can, if that's where we end up, we'll stage things with the budget process to follow that. So don't lose sight of that question. It's a fair question. Now, the follow-up to that is, when will we spend the money? You'll want to sell bonds to make sure you have cash to pay, particularly the friendly architects and or the other bills, et cetera. So we'll need a stage when we sell the bonds are also factor in. How does that play out for cash needs? Okay. Two other things that we'll focus on in the next exercise of this math, one of which is the IRS does govern. These are tax exempt bonds, and so there are rules around how much you can sell and how fast you have to spend the money. And so we've thought nothing about that yet, and we'll need to spend some time with FEH to kind of go over how fast the money go out the door and make sure that we can meet the exceptions that the IRS grants for arbitrage rebate compliance. And the other one is that banks get a special credit tax deduction to buy certain types of municipal securities, well, the bank qualified, and it's a 10 million threshold each calendar year. You borrow 10 million and one, you cannot make any of the bonds bank eligible. If you borrow 10 million, you can make all of the bank eligible. Banks in some markets value that eligibility anywhere from 0.2% to 0.6%. So where we can make bonds bank eligible, we try to, because it's worth the reduction in interest cost. I would caution and say the last year or so banks have had a tough year, and it's not been as valuable for them as in other markets. Then I would caution you and say, but I have no idea what next year will be, and we'll be selling bonds next year. So we try and think through and make things eligible where we can. Doing okay? So sources and uses, you take in, you'd sell 30 million of bonds in this example. You'd pay the bonding related expenses. There'd probably be a little bit of bond premium, and you'd have 29 and some change. This example, 29.8 million available to spend project. Doing okay? So then the question is, does that align with the design and expectations with the, for construction? So, which I'll get to in a second. So, all right, so we funded phase one of the project at this point. That gets you going with this project. Well, how do we fund phase two? And here's where I've taken some liberty. And that is, my assumption is that we would come back and fund phase two with sales tax, but that we would wait until the sales tax bonds that funded the middle school have been paid off. But they pay off mostly in 28, a little bit in 29, so they're not terribly many left. So phase two would follow phase one in terms of construction and also in terms of financing. And when you do that, the middle school bonds are paid off, and now we have sales tax revenue bond capacity. So, okay.
From like a super basic understanding that phase two would be supported through sales tax funding.
Correct.
Save money.
Save money.
Save money is sales.
Yeah.
And that's county-wide or
State.
State.
So enrollment is counted statewide. Revenues, it's 1 cent for all of us statewide. It all goes into a pot at the Department of Revenue. And you get your percentage, your enrollment divided by total statewide enrollment. That's what you get. So it's the same in Charles City as it is in Des Moines, as it is in, everybody gets the same number per student. And it's resident student gets that match. So sales tax or SAVE funding would pay for phase two, no referendum required. For a sales tax borrower, have to hold a hearing, but there's no election. Property taxpayers are not on the hook for a sales tax bond. So the 270 and the 405 and all that stuff doesn't exist, goes away, or doesn't exist. So, and so then the question is, can the sales tax support phase two? And it looks like there's 16 to 17 million of sales tax capacity available. Now let's hold that thought for a second. one of the things we need to be careful of, in my opinion, is not getting too far out on borrowing on the sales tax and then having to be short of cash for ongoing maintenance. Facility maintenance, technology, transportation, all the things that you spend some of your sales tax dollars on. So yes, we could probably borrow a few more dollars and do it bigger. Phase two, but it would come at a cost of annual revenues for other things. And so the balancing act here, I think, is trying to make sure that you have enough cash to just, I call it stuff, just to maintain your current operation. And still have enough money available to pay for the project. Did I say anything that anybody wants to disagree with?
And I think that's an important thing to mention, not just, we don't want to spend every dollar we have.
So the goal, one of the goals, one of the goals is obviously fund phase two. But one of the goals is to understand how much is left. And using estimated revenue per student and your enrollment, where we can do phase two is about 700,000+ of cash available annually for payments.
We're currently using 400,000 of the saved dollars and the rest is the federal.
We have 800,000 that left over on the save every year after the middle school approximately. And then that goes back to help the two Pebbles, which together are about 1 million. And then one of the proposals that you shared, we would have more than 600,000 a year remaining in one of the scenarios we worked out. So it'd be a change of 200,000 less, but there would be a lot less. Right now, we're putting about 450,000 a year into fixing a high school, you know.
Correct. So in those early years, you could probably afford to have the payments a little higher and with surplus, but in the later years, the numbers stop. Sure. So. Doing okay? So maybe quick summary so far. You can fund phase one and phase two as FPH has outlined it with the costs that indicated. One ballot question. No second ballot question to go above 270. But phase two would start sometime in 28 or 29, and I'll refer to them to talk about how that affects their thinking and their work. Doing okay? So then the next page, I did want to highlight property tax impact for homeowners of a 270 ballot question. So to remind you, in March, you get a letter from the assessor that says, here's what your home is worth. And if the assessor's doing their job, that little voice in the back of your head that says, gosh, I'd sell it for this. That probably means they did their job right. Anyway, I would also remind you that in Iowa, we roll back property values. Residential is linked to agriculture. So as to make sure that one class of property doesn't pay a lot more in the cost of local government than another. Years and years ago, the legislature linked those two classes together, kind of came up with this mathematical formula where ag values move, residential values move, but when it's all said and done, one class has to move up or down in order to make sure that the other class is not either paying too much or too little. So in the current fiscal year, 26 fiscal year, you and I are paying taxes on 47% of the value of our house. Okay. There are certain deductions, homestead exemption being most common. And then for those of us with gray hair, the senior exemption comes into play. You're in full. And so in my example, I pick the first one, $100,000 house. Take out the homestead and senior exemptions. The house is assessed for tax purposes at $36,000. 270 tax rate would mean an increase of $97 a year. Just over $8 a month. I realize $100,000 homes are few and far between, so I've given you several other calcs as well. One of the things we've not done yet is look up, what the average is in the community. That data exists and we can figure that out. So you could talk also about your average. Commercial property is assessed at the two-step process. First 150,000 gets the same rollback as residential, the rest gets is taxed at 90%. It's value, and so $1 million commercial property is taxed at 83.5% of value. And then they pay 270. All right, the last one, ag. So to make matters more confusing, ag is not assessed at market value. Ag is assessed based on a formula of profitability and productivity. And so the most common thing, if you scroll down to the bottom on the right side of that chart, you'll see Floyd County average assessed value $1,840. See that? Floyd County average market value $11,009. You see that? One of the most common things my friends in the ag world forget is that there's this rule that there's no linkage between market value and assessed value for tax purposes. We'll need to spend some time explaining, helping our farmers understand tax burden. I don't want to downplay the tax burden. I just want to make sure that they're doing the math correctly in their head. Quite often the time they lose a zero somewhere in there. So doing okay? Okay, so then the last few pages, I don't intend to quiz you over my pages full of numbers, but I just want to point out, here's how I'm looking at the math. I took FEH's numbers and then made up a draw schedule, assuming phase 1 takes 3 years to start to finish, assuming phase 2 kicks in afterward, etc. So totally made up estimates. And each month money goes out the door, so we tried to figure out how much would go out the door each month. And it did that so that I could then test, right, when are we selling bonds? How much are we selling the bonds for? And do we have plenty of cash on hand? That's relevant because you will earn interest on the cash. You sell 10 million of bonds in June of 26, that money won't go out the door in July. It'll still, a large part of it will still be there. You will earn interest, and that interest can't be swept on the project. The point of that whole boring story is that we're solving for the end. What's left over after everything is funded? Construction costs, design, engineering, site development, everything that they'll talk to you about, offset by bond proceeds coming in, interest earnings from cash. We're going to solve for what the end result is. And if you were looking at my numbers and you looked at the end, you'd see we had money left over. And that's good or bad, depending on, it's bad to me because it means we borrow too much. So we'll want to tighten that up as we move through the process. I didn't want to waste the time because we haven't talked to FEH about construction costs at all. So, but the next part of the exercise is to spend some time working on how fast will money go out the door. Now, I'm about wrapped up. Can I have any questions, comments, concerns?
I have a question on that, like for the egg, side of it, so. The additional monthly tax is $305.92, is that correct?
You said
The
egg?
column followed, yes,
So the
light blue highlighted number at the.
okay, so thank you for asking. All right, so at the very bottom, we've tried to say if a farmer owned 1,000 acres of average land in Floyd County, throw in the rollback factor, that would be that land would be taxed at $1,359,000. See that number?
Mhm.
There's no homestead exemptions for ag land. $3,671 a year increase for that 1,000 acres, or $305 a month.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Good question.
That's for 1,800 40 acres, not 1 million.
That 1,000 acres at $1,841 an acre assessed value.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
What's the average cost, like sale of like? Like one of those.
That was the 11,000.
That was at 11,000. No, that's 23, that's 23 data. I don't think we yet have 24 data. I think it's due next month.
What?
So we should be able to update that before you vote.
Oh, I see.
What is it?
Tim, when you say assessed value on the ag land, 1,841, that's after the rollback,
It's before.
before the rollback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just the productivity formula.
Oh, thank
when
you.
it spits out.
Got it, got
And
it.
then you apply the rollback onto that. Afterward.
Now, it's not what it would sell for. It's more of a productivity portion.
It'll sell for close to 10 times that.
Right, that's what I'm going. See where it's a lot more, but yeah.
But then that's why we'll have to help some people understand. And for those in the audience and the community, one of the hardest things for people to grasp is the letter you get in March doesn't tell you how much your tax bill will be. It doesn't. It drives the tax bill, but it does not tell you, because it doesn't tell you anything about the rollback. So.
And they assume a 10% increase in valuation this is last year and other.
With current, do you know what the current valuation is on ag land? When we're throwing assessed value per acre now for this projection. Is that what today's number is, or that's projecting?
Great question. So that's 1/1/23. So that's fiscal year that ends today. So the 1/1/24 data, we should be getting from the state middle of July, early August, and we'll be able to update the FY26. So this calculation is the current budget year that ends today.
You know how similar this number was to the 2022 fiscal year?
I do, I don't remember. I can get that for you though. We do have the old data, it's just the new
Yeah,
data.
so you kind of, you think it'd be a trend. Not going up, I would imagine.
For sure.
Can you do a quick summary too? So for those that were maybe following the previous bond project, that was also, and I know you guys were in charge of that bond, but, or Piper was in charge of that, but it was a different person, but last time it was also $2.70. So I guess maybe explain how and why it's $2.70 again. Does that make sense? So like why we're doing a bigger project and we're still able to bond at this rate,
So
this amount.
I'd have to do some digging on all the numbers, but the short answer is the values are higher. You haven't, that last election was a few years ago. The property values have gone up. We had the COVID spike property value increase. And that's gonna be probably this key driver.
Yeah. And then my understanding as a district, since we've been paying down the middle school bond, that just frees up some of our bonding capacity to then bond for this new project.
Apples and oranges to some degree. So the statute does have a bond capacity limit. We're not anywhere near that. I'm not boring you with that discussion since it's not an issue of concern. The bond capacity from paying down the middle school is what allows you to do phase 2. So that's where you free up capacity by paying the middle school. This new voter approved, or the voters to approve it, would have really nothing to do with the sales tax debt for the middle school.
So Tim, if when in November this passes, and then let's say a board wanted to come back in January and say we want to use these saved funds in 2029. Because was the board okay to do it that far out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as, so there's a public hearing requirement, and so we'll have to state when the hearing is, and we'll need to get legal advice, but I don't think there's any reason. Now, but I do want to caution, you can't write a ballot I don't think you can write a ballot for this election that says, and we'll do phase two, and we'll pay for sales tax. I think the best you can do is say what we're doing with this issue today. But that doesn't preclude this board from saying, here's what we're doing. And I've even seen boards adopt resolutions that say, here's what we're doing. So that it was phase one now and phase two later. You have that authority to do that, but recognize were you to depart the board and somebody new to come in, they have the authority to change the resolution. So nothing you can do today in this ballot that can tie the hands of the future board and force the second phase, other than just do what you're doing, which is tell people what you're doing. Relevant calculations on that would help.
I guess you mentioned farmland is obviously a big conversation, right? So thinking about prior bonds and who you worked with, how have you got the message across about how it's calculated? How those dollars aren't, what the market value is versus the assessed value versus the rollback, right? There's a lot of math that goes into those pieces.
So one of the problems you have is the time when you will be most actively talking to your taxpayers about what we want to do is probably October. And that also must be the time when most farmers are least available to have that kind of discussion. I guess I tend to believe you talk to your naysayers. Let them vent, say what they want to say, help them understand how the correct math is. I always tell any taxpayer, I'm not even going to try and talk you into voting yes, I just want to make sure you understand the math. So when you're talking to your friends, you're not misrepresenting the math to somebody else. So my inclination would be, so the best time to be talking, and you should be talking to farmers through the various organizations, but the best time to be doing that would be next month, July and August, when they're probably most available and can dedicate mental time and understand it.
And I know it's sometimes difficult to do this, but we've talked very briefly around. There've been some conversations of legislative changes that didn't make it through this year. Have you heard any legislative changes that are proposed for next year that would have any impact on this?
So there will be something that gets proposed. You can count on that. We think it'll focus mostly on management fund. That being said, all the legislators told us this last session, we will come up with a carve out that protects those that have voted, so that they can do what they want to do. Now, they never came up with a carve out, large part because they never had a bill that could garner the yes votes needed. So I'm taking them at face value that they're going to be willing, if they decide to mess around with cutting tax rates in half, for example, was one of the proposals. Take the 270 down to $1. If they come up with something like that, they're going to find a way to protect everybody that's voted. For some schools that are booked. So let's go back to the original question that I asked with now put on pause, but it was 270. Yeah.
270 is the max we can do within the 20 years that we started. Is that correct?
20 years is not a limitation of the 270. 20 years is a limitation of when you sell it. How long the bond can go from when you sell it.
So in your example, if we did 270, we paid it back early after 10 years, we could do another 270.
You bet.
Okay.
You bet.
And then 405 is the max at any one time we can have.
Yeah, I apologize. I
Yeah,
paused
that's
it
okay.
because I want to make sure, once you, I need to clarify this. Once you sell the bonds, what's on file with the Floyd County Auditor is not a 270 tax rate. It is a bond payment amount, $2 million, whatever the number is. That's what's on file. And it is the auditor's responsibility to collect that much in taxes. Property value goes down, you'll be above 270. property value goes up, it'll be below 270, and that's where you would write with it, your second part of your question. And most districts try and use that when that property value is up, same to prepay bonds early. So they, instead of letting the levy rate go down to 260, the levy ahead 10 cents, and they offset that bonds a little early.
So they hold that, they got that amount.
There's a way to do that. Yep. Really good questions.
A quick, are you on your feet? Can you run a scenario of an ag property? I've got 80 acres, assessed value 140,000. How's that gonna impact me with this 2.7?
So would that be at the average Floyd County?
It's just under that.
We said,
This is off my tax, this is 17,000. It was 140,000, $120 assessed.
$280.
That's right.
Per year.
Per year, yeah. And that's the kind of question when you sit down with rural folks. You kind of have to sit there and do that with them. I've had people bring in their tax statements, so because nobody owns land, like just one parcel, you got different parcels, townships, and sit down with every box of tax statements and work through it together.
So this only applies even to farmland in Floyd County. So if a farmer had Floyd County or farmer had farmland in another county, that's not included in that calculation.
We have a sliver, I think, of Chickasaw also.
So if it's outside of the school district.
Yeah.
That's
Is it the school district boundary or county?
School district.
School
So one of
Lower
the
Springs. I think would be affected.
so like,
In Lower Springs, so there's West Department.
Well, it's just school district, right?
Yeah,
That
I-
restricts it further.
and I didn't look hard enough to say, all right, do we have a little bit of land in Chickasaw? It's only within your corporate spending the boundaries, so you decide you want to move forward, it goes with that Chickasaw to the calculations, just won't work out, it's easy to do with those folks. But again, anybody who's in any of the neighboring districts that are in your county, they're not gonna pay it.
Tim, could I add something? And I think this is true. I believe we also have the ability to have a tax calculator where people can fill in the information through the process of the referendum.
Quite often these referendums involve like a website set up, and now and their team can talk to you more about that, but one of the things we usually build is a little calculator that all the calcs are hidden. Just plug in your number and it spits out the outcome. Real easy to do.
The rollback, are those the same for 26?
So FY 26 are what's showing you there. Like in 27, we won't know until October. That's the next variable is. Right, but don't lose sight of, that's the one that these folks will be paying their first tax bill off of. So. We'll have a new rollback. Before for everybody to be using for their first tax bill from this election.
So the tax calculator scenario, it would calculate for commercial, residential and ag property. So anyone could know how their taxes would be affected.
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Move on to the board recommendation for bond.
Just here for this two options.
Good evening, everybody. I'm back tonight. If you've got any questions regarding the new information that we heard tonight and how that will interplay with what we've been doing and what we're going to be doing, I'm happy to answer that. We have given you a proposal to continue our work with you through the bond referendum process now, should you wish to do that with us. And then I'm also here to just answer any questions. We did a pretty extensive presentation last time, so there's a lot of things to think about, a lot of information in there. So the financing is obviously a new part and a very important part of it. Often it's the last thing because now we've got a plan that we're working off of. The nice thing is that we work with Tim and his organization all the time. You know, they do most of the statewide financing. We do a lot of projects, so they kind of understand how we go about putting things together. We understand how they go about putting things together. There's a lot of intricacies here, and there's going to be a lot of specific questions from people. It's our aim to show, again, the district has a very unique and substantial need. And then how we are going to plan for that over time with your financing. So you heard 3 different recommendations last time. One was from your administration, one was from the committee, one was from us. That option 2 seems to fit your needs best. That's what we've kind of been focusing on, obviously, here. So if anybody has any questions as follow-up to last time, I'm happy to answer them. Anything about how we will work with Piper Sandler to continue this conversation. And what we will next steps going forward after this. Can I answer any questions about our presentation last time? Has anything new come up? Any other questions, that kind of thing?
I guess I have a question related to some of the reductions that we've talked about.
Sure.
You know, some of the reductions, you know, are based off of ways for us to save money, right? To be able to fund this project. Looking at some of these things. Would you be able to give us a timeline with some lead time to say, hey, we are in the process of doing this renovation. If the community wants to support this in some other funding way, we have so much time to be able to incorporate that without any additional cost based on the original numbers that we worked.
Absolutely. There's a few things I should probably say to answer that question. Number one, the reason those are on the list, because at this stage of the project, those were large enough chunks and numbers that we could provide those options for you to get under the funding that you had. So they are in no priority order. They're completely up to you. We also have the ability to move some of those chunks, if you will, maybe into phase 2. Because we're probably going to come and tell you, and you may know this from looking, you don't have enough capacity bond-wise to fund all of phase 1, including the 4 million that you set aside. But I came up with $6 or $7 million as savings. Those could be savings in name only. They could go into the next phase. You could fundraise for them separately. We can also bid them as alternates to the because we know on bid day, we may have a really great day. There's a lot of people interested. There's not a lot of work out there and we get good numbers. We may have a bad day. There's plenty of work out there, you know, so there's a lot of factors. None of the options that were given would be off the table at any time that we couldn't talk about it before it was too late. Because we looked at this again as a master plan. Okay, we looked at this as all of your needs, remember, and then we're trying to check off as many boxes as we can as we go down. So I don't see any reason why any of these can't come back later on. In fact, we're already relying on some private funding, right, for phase two, and the auditorium portion that we looked at, that kind of thing. So I hope that answers the question. I don't think there's anything there that we couldn't deal with, and we would let you know.
What's the timeline would you anticipate?
Well, judging from, when you pay off the middle school in 2029, this passes in November. It's gonna take us, some time to get it designed and everything. I would like to see it bid and under construction next year, so 26.
So a year from now.
A year from now, essentially, maybe a little bit longer. It's probably gonna take 2 to 3 years to build the first phase, because there are some dominoes there, right? We have to build some before we can relocate people to build the rest. So it's, it wouldn't be a stretch to say 2 to 3 years for that. That puts us about right when the 28-29 payment comes off on the middle school, going into phase two. And so then there's maybe another couple of years there. Could be a 5-year process altogether, assuming everything was in a row and the financing was available. That's off the top of my head right now. I'd have to do some more once we get further along, but I think that's reasonable.
So
I believe the board was given a sheet that has the potential really up to the top. And then potential reductions.
Right.
Phase one and phase two. So if you look at that sheet. It's very clear that there's not enough funding to just say, well, let's do it all. But you can also look at that sheet and you can clearly see that if you took all of those reductions out, you actually as a district have more capacity paid than that result would be. And so you really have the opportunity to make some choices here soon. But that would be a part of the bond referendum to say, we are going to do this and get ourselves further up for that capacity, if that's what you chose for. So that's not meant to say that those reductions are, they are there and they're stuck there and somewhere in the distant future, those could come back. Up to the bonding capacity that's shown on that sheet, you can actually add some of those back in to be able to say, as part of the bond referendum, this is something that's going to happen.
another question. So you've had a contingency, you show out your contingency at 15%. So is that your contingency across the project as a whole, or just those particular?
No, so the way the contingency works right now is, remember I talked about a design contingency and a construction contingency. Right now, we have both because we don't have a design and we don't have a project under construction. So that is slightly elevated because of the time frame, the complexity of the project, how long it's going to take, all of that. As we design the project, those contingencies get tightened up because now we know what the scope of the work is going to be, construction wise too. So that contingency should continue to get smaller as we design the project. That's going to free up some money. But also remember, we talked about escalation factors. If we don't have a project phase 2 that starts for 3 years, remember my estimate was based on 26 numbers. We've got to add some escalation back in. So the contingency at this point being high is, accomplishing 2 points. And that is to make sure we have enough so that we've got room to do what we need to do, and also factor in the time frame. I'm fairly comfortable with that. It's a moving target. It really is, and it has been. So that's why it's a little bit higher.
So you also mentioned looking, because you see a lot of school districts who are starting to talk about this, right? What's the landscape look for bidding and options, in the spring?
Yeah, very difficult to say. I think I heard Tim say 40 schools were looking at referendums. That's a lot. And it's not a surprise. We know it's coming, right? There's been legislation. It's also moving for an election the next time you have a chance. So we know some of those things. I couldn't say with any detailed knowledge how many are going to pass. That makes a difference, and what region they're in. This project is big enough and interesting enough that we're going to have a lot of contractors involved, no matter when we bid it and what it looks like. Another thing that we have going for us is a lot of it's inside work, renovation work, which is great for over the winters. contractors like that because they can plan for it. We'll help them stage it out so that works. So we've got a lot going for us here for that.
And the last question, so when we built the middle school, we had a project manager, an outside third party contractor that we hired to do that work. What's your recommendation for this project?
So we have the ability to administer a project like this on our own. So we don't do the same thing as a construction manager. Construction manager in Iowa is construction manager at risk. Used to be as advisor so they didn't have any skin in the game. Changed a little bit. If you have a construction manager, you have a lot of small contracts that you signed with a bunch of different contractors. We don't love that idea for you. That makes you the general contractor in a sense. They usually charge about the same amount we do to be on site, less than we are, because they're just during construction primarily. Some of the advantages are they have the ability to look at costs, probably that we don't. We don't build anything, so they do have an advantage there. They'll have somebody on site all the time. That's important in some cases. Fast track, really large projects. In my particular view, because I know how I run a project, I don't think it's necessary for a district to spend that money because I'm there quite often. I have a team that's there quite often. And we can administer it the same way that they would. And we're an advisor to you, so our allegiance is to the district, not to the contractor. We write the specs, we do the design, so we intimately know all of the details of that. So, I don't think it's necessary. I've done big projects like this before. I'm confident that I can do that and run it and we won't have any problem. I think they're more valuable for different type of construction, not schools, but more fast track, larger project, municipal projects, that kind of thing. That's an opinion.
How many projects have you guys done of this size?
Of this size, so I'm year 30. I've probably done a dozen of them myself that are this big. I'm doing one right now in Pauline that's this complex. Very complex, a lot of dominoes in order and that kind of thing, over 3.5 years. I did all the planning on the schedule and, when construction was going to be done on each phase. And then the contractor actually ended up using my schedule for themselves it doesn't always happen that way, it did here. So I'm pretty comfortable with that right now. I also have a team that has worked with me on those too. So I've probably done that. I did $60 million project for the event center in Sioux City with a bigger team. So I'm familiar with that. Our other offices too, they've probably each done at least a dozen in the last 10 years that are this big, complex. So we have a lot of experience doing.
Great, thank you.
I don't remember, we never had a contract manager when I was in.
No, we never had a CM in
Okay.
Sioux City, yeah. A little bit different, little elementary schools there, those a little bit, a lot of new ones, not a lot of renovation, that kind of stuff. Still didn't think it was necessary, neither did you at the time, so. Any questions about how we will interface with Piper Sandler, how we'll plan, what we're doing? I think what we need to do now, the recommendation was for option 2, both phases. And we came up with this financing option that uses the GEO bond for phase 1 mostly, and then the SAVE funds for phase 2. I think that's a really good plan for you. Coming off of middle school, being able to do all of this work faster is a huge advantage for a couple reasons. It's not going to cost as much as if you wait 10, 20 years to do it. It is going to disrupt class, but it'll disrupt the least amount of kids than if you spread it out. So yes, there's going to be a whole graduating class is going to be affected by this. And we are very sensitive to that. It's an experience going to school, and especially high school. We want them to have that experience. So we do a lot of work on making sure that that works out for them. So I think there's some real advantages to doing it this way for you all. I think it'll be good for us to explain that to the community, help you do that, and see the advantages of that. I'm really confident in the plans that we have. The administration's been great working with us to figure out what we need to do and how we need to do it. This is still a process, right? So I've said this before, the plans that you see on the screen, that is not what this will look like when it's done. It's just a lot of evolution from here. These are the core concepts and the ideas that we're gonna be having in the project. What order they come in, what they look like, those things are gonna change as we go through the process. But I think we have a really good start here. And I think we can explain it very well to your community about why it works. Especially with the knowledge that we have from some of the last ones. I think we've done some things differently here that I hope you all have noticed and think will be beneficial. So I'm optimistic about that. I did give Dr. Burnite our proposal for you. I think you shared that with the board, did you not?
Yeah, it's our next time.
Continue?
It's the next time.
Okay, so I can answer questions about that as well if you'd like to. That would take us through the bond referendum vote, which is fourth. We are electing to contract with the Donovan Group to do a lot of the marketing materials. All of the content would come from us with administration's help. They're just gonna put things together like mailers and flyers and help us when we have meetings and have the visuals and that kind of thing. Because you're already working with them and they kind of know they were involved before as well, which we took into consideration. Good or bad, they were here and they know kind of how that works. So they're in our proposal too. And that's full service. So we will do everything, help organize your committee, go through public meetings, provide content, all of that kind of thing. This is one thing that Dr. Burnite hasn't been through with me because we didn't have to do a bond referendum in Sioux City. But I approach it the same way. It's just another problem. The problem to solve now is how do we demonstrate our needs so that enough people say yes, we need to do that. So that's my focus right now with you going through the next few months.
I think that brings me along a little bit, just to talk a little bit about experiences. So I worked with FEH as a first high school principal and then as a superintendent of 7 buildings. We never had a construction manager, and frankly, I think when you work with FEH, a construction manager is kind of a waste of your dollars. And we never had issues or problems. So I do think that those kinds of experiences are real. And just one other point, when Matt talks about being conscious of the student experience, the school that I was a high school principal at, we worked 2 years in doubling the size of the high school. Those 2 years were the highest ACT scored in the history of our school. And so that disruption is managed in a way that school continues, and it wouldn't be a problem for the students here either.
So I guess the board also has the opportunity, if there's something, we look at one of these numbers that you have $27,309,393 on phase 1. That's with the reductions. And if we wanted to add back something, let's say you and I talked about if we wanted middle school wrestling. You said, even though some of the numbers look like it's more than 30 million, you said if we went to 30 million, you felt comfortable we could figure out a way to make that work or take it close to our. So I guess this would be a chance for the board to say too, if you want to put something back in and still stay around that $30 million or just under $30 million mark. We talked about wrestling, but if that's moving that facility here, putting the elevator and doing some of the things that we have to do to use that space. But maybe there's things the board wanted to bring back, and it's kind of the board's purview to add or keep it there, or
Brian, do we have to make all of those decisions tonight?
You don't, as far as I'm concerned, you don't have to do that. If you want to tell me some priorities, because I'm gonna have to go back and sort of massage this a little bit now that we know the numbers, because we are a little bit over what we wanted for phase 1, so I do need to do that. But if you had priorities you wanted to talk about, I'd be happy to take those, to work those in. I will get as many as I can, or suggest another way to do it, and timing and that kind of thing.
so I think if the board approved the motion that was recommended, which says the board approves FEH design option 2 with a cost opinion of $30 million for the November ballot. Then we could adjust
Between now
what's, yeah, we could adjust what's going in there.
Right.
we don't need final details tonight.
No, we'll be back. Yeah, we'll be back and we'll have this worked out pretty much before we do the second community meeting or committee meeting. We've got one scheduled tentatively should you act for the 9th to start getting people together and understand the process and things like that. And we're gonna present this to them so they understand what we're doing. And then I'll have it all together up probably the second one.
I think my reticence is that if we push 2.5 million to phase 2, an additional 2.5 million to phase 2, then now it's a real challenge to make that number work and still keep save funds at that 600,000 or more level down the road. So that's where I would recommend we go closer to 30 million
Right.
and instead of pushing something into phase 2 that's not there. So
You also know that this has to do with the auditorium part of phase 2. We included a scale back to a 400 seat auditorium from a 500 seat. And then we said there's some community funding that was already attached to the auditorium. We could add more private funding to get up to the next level for size. So there's another way to, instead of move that to phase 2, just expand phase 2, but call it private funding or other sort of funding.
And then Matt, that kind of gets to another question I had, and I know a couple years ago, we had legal come in and give us some, I don't know, information about guidance about what can be privately funded on a public building, what can't be. So like when I go through this list, I see new bleachers, new greenhouse. Like if somebody came and said, I want to support that financially, are they allowed to, or is there restriction on those type of?
Yeah.
Naming.
I don't believe
Yeah.
there's a restriction, there may be for a naming right situation, because I believe that's board policy
on naming,
rather
No, it
than,
just has to do with
somebody would have named
naming,
something.
yeah,
but a person or a company or an entity could provide funding for those things.
right.
And a public, aka school, is allowed to accept
I
that.
believe that's true unless there's naming and then there's policy.
Yeah. Take it.
Okay.
You see that a lot with, I think it's been discussed here, people buy seats, they buy, pavers, that's a fundraising kind of a thing, similar concept.
So the issue comes down to like whether you put their name on it or not, but whether or not doing it.
That's at least part of it anyway.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be hard to get an opinion on that, I would think.
No, and I, with the board approval, I plan to talk to the attorney tomorrow. Planning.
The main thing that we need tonight is just as printed here.
Correct.
That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
You could take the recommendation of 30 million, or you could try and scale it back to that 27, but the recommendation is to stick with the 30 million and move forward with these guys at that rate. I'll make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the FAH design option 2 with the cost opinion of $3 million to the November ballot.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we can proceed to vote. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion will carry. Now move on.
Thank you very much.
I have one question for the next item.
We're on the marketing.
So looking at your cost structure of page 2, you have fees, we have fees, and then the Donovan group fees. So I assume that those are separate fees, each independent. Okay.
That's right. Their fees are monthly, they charge, I think it's $3,500 a month, and then they do anything up to. Figuring about 3 months, I think, for that.
That in addition, you think we already are paying.
No, we haven't been. As to my knowledge, we're not paying them anymore, right?
Brian, do you know?
Oh, sorry.
Donovan group, we're not paying.
No, as of July 1, we moved over for our monthly communication. We're working with the AEA. We're gonna do a communications audit with the AEA and we work with the AEA. But Donovan had a lot of success on bond campaigns.
You work with FEH or with
Yeah, we have.
30 years, we heard it.
Just happened, yes, we have.
So they would know that this isn't, that they have the capacity.
I've already
to support.
spoke, that's where my proposal came from.
So they know that they could support this work.
I never prepared you, they were excited about it.
I'd make a motion to approve the bond campaign agreement with FH Design with Donovan.
Second.
Been properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we can proceed to vote. All those in favor, state aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion will carry.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can now move on to end of the year progress update for school.
So we have Joe Carney, he videotaped his because he is on a family vacation and when I checked the dates, I was looking at the 14th of July and then when we moved to the 30th, he had a conflict, so. So can you play on Joe Carney's presentation? Thank you, Jose.
I was gonna say, it's not coming out of the sound bar.
So, go to Zoom and change the audio. Yeah, Zoom. So down there, so yeah, click on that. There you go. And then. Probably sharp HDMI, maybe. It's probably TV.
Thanks, Joe.
Let's go to Lincoln. Thank you, Zach.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about Lincoln Elementary's building goals and our progress at the end of the year, so we can go to the next slide, please. So our goals throughout this last school year was a 10% growth in proficiency from spring to spring for literacy as measured by FAFSA-CBMR. And for math, we had 10% growth as well as our goal, but that was from fall to spring. Utilizing math. And then our culture and climate goal was to have a 25% decrease in the overall behavior referrals that we had this school year. You can go to the next slide, please. So our results. So in literacy, we chose to do a spring to spring because we have the data for all 3 grade levels that we serve in our building. And so if you look, you can see that we had a clear learning loss over summer from spring 24 to when they came in to their new grade level. But by the time we got to spring 2025, we had a slight bit of increase in proficiency. We worked really, really hard in from winter to spring in kind of tightening up interventions. Our teachers started piloting CKLA curriculum as grade level teams too. So if you see, if our goal would have been from fall to spring, so the entire academic year, we actually had a growth of 4.57% in proficiency. We're really looking forward to the new curriculum that we've got. We just did training right before teachers were done with the school year, and they're so excited about what's to come. That's how come they stepped in and they started piloting the curriculum as grade level teams. We also just implemented our first summer school session in a very long time. We are kind of looking forward to evaluating the success of that, seeing how we can strengthen that program if we're going to continue it. And if there's any help in supporting that learning loss that you can see from spring 24 to fall 24. Next slide, please. So for math, our 10% increase in proficiency from fall to spring, we met this goal. We were very excited about implementing our Bridges curriculum for the second year. So we really focused on fidelity to the curriculum this year and doing checks that way, continuing to utilize our data to guide our instruction. So we're doing a lot of formative and summative assessments, working in PLCs to really review the data. Bridges actually has a lot of really nice built-in screeners and spreadsheets that we can use to input student data and identify students who are in need of further support and assistance. And our PLCs have been doing a great job of utilizing those resources with fidelity and then implementing interventions to help support our students. And the results really show for our building and actually each grade level as well. We're looking forward next year to continuing what we're doing and refining that. Next slide, please. So for our culture and climate goal, the 25% decrease in overall referrals made in both minors and majors, we met that goal and surpassed it. We had 27.4% decrease overall in behavior referrals at Lincoln Elementary this year. Super proud of that goal. A lot of it was structural changes that we made, and then also as adults, how we're responding and tightening up some of those things. We also did a conditions for student learning, and we do that in the spring every single year. The students take that survey. Their survey responses actually reaffirm this goal area. So 96% of students reported that rules are clear, and 95% said if they break rules, there will be consequences. So our students know what the rules are, they know what they need to do, and they know that there's going to be a consequence if they're not meeting those expectations. Looking forward, we're planning to focus intentionally on peer-to-peer relationships. This was one of the highest areas of need indicated by the student survey on the conditions for learning. Only 68% of our students reported that they treat each other with respect, and that actually even shows in our behavior referrals as well. A lot of it is peer-to-peer interaction, so we're going to really intensively target that next year. Next slide. So our ISASP results. So since our building spans grades 2 through 4, only grades 3 and 4 take the ISASP. But the ISASP is very important because that's what our school performance profile results go off of or measured off of. So you can see for ELA, we increased from year to year, so 24 to 25 in proficiency percentages. And then also by cohort. So we only have one cohort, the 3rd grade moving down into 4th grade for the 25-24 or for the 25 school year. However, you can see that we increased in ELA. In math, we increased for 3rd grade, 4th grade we didn't, and that kind of threw us for a loop a little bit. We're going to be working with Dr. Schilling and the 4th grade team to kind of drill in. ISASP actually just released our full data files that have domains and stuff like that. So we can kind of really drill in and see if there's something that we're missing in our instruction in what we're presenting with our Bridges curriculum. So that's our next step there, because we're not exactly sure how or why that happened. Even when we were doing our MAP assessments throughout the year, MAP is how we measure our students' growth in math. And it has a projected ISASP proficiency that it provides us every single time we assess. So even when we were assessing in MAP, the percentage projected proficient on the ISASP was higher than the 53%. At the end of the year, it was supposed to be 59%. So we're a little bit off there. We don't know if it was bad testing day for the students or if there's something deeper there. So we're going to be looking at that.
Chelsea, do you know what the 3rd grade math percentage was? Or when you had mentioned like how the map.
Yeah,
was predicted.
it very, there we go. So if you look, 3rd, 53 or 52.34%. So if you go back over to the ISASP.
That's
they
what
really,
the maps projected the ISASP were to be?
No, you're right. I have it on my computer.
But you remember it being more
Yeah,
similar.
I'll email you.
But you remember it being more, it was not.
It was very much, I looked at that and they're very similar. Usually they're not totally spot on, but within a few percentage points.
So something really was off with that.
Yeah, it kind of threw us for a loop a little bit, so. You can go back to the ISASP slide. Thank you. So really overall, I just want to say, like, we had a pretty great year. We met 2 of our 3 building goals. Our teachers are so excited about the CKLA curriculum and what's to come for literacy. We're really looking forward to continuing to improve and kind of hit the ground running when we start the next school year. So what questions do you guys have?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Middle school position.
All right, kind of in general, it was a really great year. I felt our growth was good in 2 of the 3 areas. We grew significantly. We came in under budget and we had 100% teacher retention this year. So I don't know that I can look back at the going on 9 years as administrator that I've had a better year. So I just want to say thanks to the board and Dr. Burnite for all of the support. It was definitely, I felt it. So goal 1, kind of skip all the way down to the end. We really, the big matrix that we look at is of course our ISAT scores. That's what's reported to the state. All the other ones are intermittent kind of predictive scores for us. So if you go to the next slide, please. I'll start with the kind of the meh one. Our math scores went down a little bit. Our goal was to get to 70% across the board in all of our grade levels, or an average of 70%, and we missed it. We went down by 1.2%. We did have a few cohorts that grew, and if you look, I've color coded them over the years. Our 7th to 8th grade grew by 6%, went down by 2%, went up by 2%, and went down by 5%. I got to figure out this 5th grade thing. I'm not real entirely sure about why, but every single year we seem to have a dip, and then we rebound really hard in 6th, and then 7th, and then 8th grade. We're doing great. Overall, I'm not too overly concerned about our math scores. They're right where they need to be. I would love it to be an upward trending thing.
we are gonna continue to dive in, especially with our standards work and our formative assessment work and focus in on this. We really, to be honest, we did a lot of focusing in on our reading and writing this year, because that's where the scores were kind of not as great last year. But if you go to the next one, please. Lots and lots to celebrate here. We went from 68 to 72.3%. That's the second highest overall building-wide percentage. Those are percentage of students proficient on ISASS. So anytime we get inverse of our free and reduced lunch, that's a pretty big thing to celebrate. And we had, for the first time in my career, a group of kids who were over 90% proficient. And as the numbers were coming in, I was like crying in my office when we were looking at that. Our eighth grade class went from 72 to 91% proficient, which was outstanding, and we screamed that from the rooftops. But that's not all. So those guys grew by 19%. Our seventh grade also grew by 11%. So anytime we get double-digit growth in any particular field, this was also a year where we were dealing with budget cuts and staffing was mixed up. We had in middle school a long time ago, they granted these things called an all middle school endorsement, which means that you could teach anything. So we have 4 teachers who have old school, all middle school endorsements who took on reading. They were a science teacher by trade, another science teacher by trade, and a math teacher by trade, and they rocked it. And they produced these results, which was pretty amazing. And I think that talks about the collaborative spirit that they came into the year with. They leaned on each other, and they really dove into the PLC and the collaboration that was happening. They asked a lot of questions, and there was a lot of humility at the beginning of the year, which I think led to some pretty amazing growth. We have amazing leaders in our ELA. Next slide. And our,
Can you go back to the other one? I just think like you said, it's one thing to go from one year to the other, but you can see 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Some of those classes were like in the similar range. Like it's not like they were increasing by like 8 to 10% each year. There was something significant that happened.
Yeah, pretty amazing. I think there was I think we maximized our students, honestly. Like we really pumped up what it meant to put your name on something. And we had it was about a month-long hype up process to get them ready for the ISASS, and it was our Super Bowl. And I think the kids acted like it. They were hungry for their scores. As soon as they came out, we started giving them to them. We were celebrating. We were calling parents. Like it was a big deal. And I think that's how it should be, because it is really like the culmination of everything that they do. And it's a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of pressure on our school. And whenever we're comparing ourselves to other schools in the state, we want to do our best. I think that's our best. Next one, please. Our science score were pretty amazing. And they only take the science score in 5th grade and 8th grade. So we don't have a year by year, but we do have a couple of cores that we've been tracking. And you can see the green one went from 63% proficient to 76 in that span. That's a pretty significant increase. And then our 5th grade scores have been really steady at about that 60%. We are implementing some new science curriculum across the board. I'm excited to see how that plays out and how that aligns with the standards and the work that they do there. Next. Boring stuff, we came in under budget, which is great, right, Danielle? We came in under budget. I tried to spend it in the last minute, but I think we came in like 13,000 under budget, which was really, really good. Just kind of tightened it up a little bit and really looked at the things that we were spending our money on, and we were given a challenge and we met it. So big thanks to Dana. She's got an accountant mind. She would run these reports and we would talk about it every single month. We sat down and looked at where we were trending and was feeling really good about it. It's like having a budget meeting with your wife every single month. All right.
She your work wife?
She's my work wife, yeah. Next
goal
one
was 10%, so you almost doubled the goal, right?
Yeah, our goal was 10%. And then this one, I don't think anything says more about a culture and engagement than retention. The number one killer, like they say, you don't quit your job, you quit your boss. And this was kind of a I know that we've been kind of reeling and dealing with some iffy culture in the middle school. And we did some really hard work on that, and I think that this year was like, oh, we came over the hill and we're rolling. So I think overall, staff satisfaction is amazing. Everybody's coming back. And we've got some really great hires for some of it. We're fully staffed in special ed. It's one thing when the teachers that are coming back. It's another thing when teachers that are there are coming back and they're recruiting their friends. Like, hey, you need to come work here. It's a really good place to work. So pretty excited about that. Next slide. It really comes down to our clients though, and our clients are our students. So our tertiary clients are our parents, and then the students, parents, and then the teachers are kind of like the people who get it done. And when asked, we polled all of our students when asked, and I think there's 2 questions on there that I really focused in on. My teacher cares about me. When there's poor culture in a grade level or in a classroom and a teacher is not happy, the kids know it, they can feel it. And middle schoolers, by the way, are the most critical people in the world. If you guys have ever raised one, you understand. 90 or 82.9% stated they strongly agreed or agreed that their teachers cared about them. I don't know if I could get my own kids to say that about myself sometime. And then 92.1 said that they strongly agreed or agreed that there is a trusted adult that they could go to here at school. Middle school is a tough time, and when there's adults around that they know they can count on and they can trust, I feel like we're doing the right thing. All right, next one. And then lastly, like I said, overall, it's been a great year. Some highlights were our science and ELA numbers were very positive. Our math was slightly down. We came in under budget, and we kept all of our amazing staff and the students felt that teachers cared about them. I feel like this was a really great year. Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Jose. Awesome. Hi, guys. So I'm going to start off kind of where just left off when we talked last time. You can go ahead and advance the slide. I told you really in the last time that we had talked that, you know, ideal in credits. That's where our finish line is giving students the accumulation of their kindergarten through 2nd grade through whatever, all boils down to the high school diploma. And they need credits to get to that finish line. The data, and I know we've had more conversations around some of this data, kind of inflated that and backed quite a bit, stair step back quite a few more years to see where we're at in terms of, hey, how many students are passing classes? And I kind of refer to this as the butterfly effect. It opens doors and opportunities. The more credits, the better you do as a freshman. Leads to more opportunities for classes you can take as a sophomore, junior, senior, whether it's RCC, whether it's taking college classes, potentially open campus as a senior, and exploring the things that you want to do, right? It's passing those classes, earning your credits, and getting where you need to be. It helps our graduation rate. It helps our overall success in our school performance profile and everything. So when I say the butterfly effect, it's credits, and we deal in credits at the high school. Very pleased that we made, you know, a significant improvement. I said I was going to hope to come back for our 2nd semester data. 92% of our students passed all of their classes, which is fantastic. Again, that's a jump of 4% from the 1st semester. And that's not, again, I just want to highlight that. We're not dumbing down curriculum. Teachers are not being instructed to cut corners. It's just the underlying value that we're going to bust our tails to do what's right for kids and get them to the finish line. I was kind of taught a lot of metaphors in my life, but one of them is that potential is like gasoline. If it just sits around, it stinks. But if you put a match on it, it can create a spark and something special. And we want to get that potential out of each and every kid. And that's where it kind of starts with credits. And that's a testament to our overall staff, whether it's our student assistance teams and making sure every single kid has that one person, like we spoke of last time, that one person that's going to have their back support, pull them in, hold them accountable, but also know that accountability is care. Okay, we're not going to cut corners. We're going to do things the right way. So very, very pleased to share that. Hey, again, even though it's 2nd semester, all of this is 1st semester data for past years. 92% of our students passed all their classes, which is fantastic.
Levi, do you have a breakdown of which grade did better, or were they all similar to about 92%?
I do not have that breakdown, but I can definitely get that to you. And I can pull those lists for you, for sure. But I would say, I don't want to speculate right now. I'll have to look at it specifically. So that's just the overall student body right now. So you can go ahead. ISAST, like Mr. Taylor referenced, that's a big measuring stick for us. Those were our goals, our incentive program. I think motivated students do well. 11th grade, it was open campus lunch, which was, they loved it. It was fantastic. And again, to earn that incentive, they had to be proficient, sustaining, or showing growth in 2 out of the 3 tests. Okay. And then 10th grade, attending an afternoon movie at the Charles Theater. We took a couple bus loads of kids down there. Popcorn pop. And then 9th grade, hey, they love food. So the family provided a free extra value meal for that. Go ahead, Jose. So to get to some of those results, my first focus was to look at our participation rates. Looking at immediate fixes for our Iowa school performance profile. And for me, the immediate fix was we can get as close to 100% as possible of students taking the test, right? So you look at last year's data for English language arts, 95%. We had 99% this year. Take all the tests. Math, we were around 95 last year. This year we're at 99. In science, 97 in science, and that's just the sophomores that take the science test. Every single kid took the test. So teachers were really diligent about getting kids in, working around schedules. Hey, pull in, let's take the test. Let's get this done. Because again, if we're below 95%, we get dinged on that from the Iowa School Performance Profile. So next year, or excuse me, last year, we had a student subgroup that did not have and meet that 95% criteria. We won't get dinged on that next year, which I'm very proud of. And that was a group effort with everyone. So that's only going to help us out. Go ahead, Jose. And then proficiency. Very, very pleased by our growth. We're going to see an overall increase in proficiency in our English language arts by anywhere from your 5 to 8%. Okay. Noticing that our 9th grade is about 92 students, 10th grade a little bit higher, but either way, last year we were at 64.84%. We take 65, 68, 72. We're going to see a jump there, which I'm very, very proud of. Math is sustaining, might see a little bit of a dip, but we've made some changes to address that. So we're offering next year financial literacy as a math credit, which I think is going to really help our kids out and getting some real life translatable skills. And again, this former business teacher coming out to me, I used to teach personal finance as a required graduation credit, right? The things that we all hear and see on social media. I wish high school had taught me this. I wish high school had taught me that. Our math department is going to undertake that. And I think that's going to really help our kids focus more in math and saying, hey, I'm going to be able to really, really use this aspect of it. And again, that's not taking away from any of our current offerings whatsoever. And then the biggest jump you're going to see is science at 14%, which is amazing. When we got those results in, you should have seen some of the teachers jumping for joy. It was pretty cool. So again, whatever the reason for our increases, I think it's just, hey, we're going to focus on what we can do. We're going to be intentional about day in and day out, doing what's best for kids, pushing them, give them a little incentive like we did, nothing too extraordinary. But I'm very proud of our kids. They took it serious. They weren't avoiding it. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. Just having been a classroom teacher for 14 years or something like that. It was like, hey, kids are always dreading it. They came in, they got the work done. And I think our results prove that. So again, that's only going to help us in our performance profile. Go ahead, Jose. 4 big goals for the year. We're going to retain 93% of our staff. Very proud of that. We got good teachers that are proving that they're doing the best things for kids. Wednesday after school detentions went well. We did see and feel an overall decrease in tardies and unexcused absences. I think that we were about 15% less than last year. For number 3, arrived about $17,000 under budget. The challenge that we were faced with at the beginning of the year, very proud of that. But also it wasn't anything to where we were going without, if that makes sense. If we need it, we bought it. We were just very diligent about how we spend our funds. And now that I have a full summer ahead of me, or 1 month in now, it's, last year it was like, hey, jumping on in the middle of July, here we go. Now I'm able to take a harder look at some stuff that like, hey, we might not need that next year. We didn't really use it. So, you know, again, our diligence and spending coming from the business background, our teachers really ran with that. And then again, I'm going to echo what Joe Carney said. Our BLT and our PLC process was good, but we've already made some improvements with Dr. Jen Schilling for next year, where our secondary building is going to be aligned and digging in on that data. Very, very pleased with that. Go ahead, Jose. And then looking ahead again, huge thank you for a wonderful first year. I'm going to echo what a lot of people have already said with our building principals. We have excitement and we have positive things going. And that positive word of mouth is huge, right? That's huge for Northeast Iowa. That's, hey, if you're from here or there, hey, good things are happening at Charles City. And thank you personally for that 5 unanimous vote to approve the process there. That's massive. Knowing that, hey, again, we're going to create a better learning environment, a physical learning environment. We got the people, we got the bones, we got the structure, we got the foundation. Now let's get a couple more improvements to that. So I put that picture of that, again, ideal in metaphors, not trying to sound inspirational. This is my mindset every single year, just to make sure, you know, it's not, hey, it was a good first year, but I'm not going to be happy with it. It's the metaphor of Sisyphus, push the rock, right? And that's not meant in a negative way. It's meant in a positive way. We're never going to reach the top of the hill and get the rock over. It's every single year we're going to look for improvements, ways to refine, ways to get better. That's improvement. That's what we're trying to teach our kids, our students, our clientele with the growth mindset. Hey, you failed? Okay, get up, push the rock. All right, let's go. And that's the same mindset I'm going to promise to continue to bring here, not just 1 year, but year in and year out. And I think I know our staff and our students are committed to that as well. So next year, we're just going to keep pushing the rock and looking for things to refine and do better. So any questions for me? Awesome. Thanks for being great.
There. Gonna move on to board policies.
We just had one policy this time, and that was to change our 504 coordinator.
Make a motion to approve the second reading of policies.
Second that.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we can proceed to vote. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Move on to board comments.
So I'll be brief. I was at the robotics contest in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it was at Worcester Polytechnical Institute. It's about 7,500 students in that campus in Worcester, Massachusetts. It was really, really fun to watch the students kind of work together and plan together and spend, basically 3 days together doing stuff and getting ready. Patrick Saint, he got 15 kids, not 15 kids, 8 kids through TSA security, got them on a plane, got them in a van, and took them to a rough part of town on accident because they went to get some food when they landed and realized, oh, this is not the place we want to be at 10:30 at night. But they all came out, nobody got any trouble. They took them back to Boston and went to MIT for a couple hours. So he did a fantastic job of keeping them all on track and going. And they did a really nice job. Their first 2 runs at that were disappointing. They actually went down. And so he had kind of a pep talk with them like, hey, this is your last day. You've already, met your goal just to be here. And they came out and did really well. So it was awesome. So there were a lot of parents searching. So.
How big of them?
So they have it like it was a big gym. It was a two layer. I don't know the size of it.
Different like schools.
130-ish. I think there were something like 40 countries represented. They had South Dakota, North Dakota, which I was like, they have schools there? We had a couple from Iowa, a couple from Minnesota, a couple from Wisconsin, so like real close as well. And then they had German team, UAE team, England, France, Ireland, Germany. Yeah.
They just get nervous. Do you think that's how they struggle? Or they just have a competition?
Great question. So there are several teams there that get perfect scores. It's impressive. And so what happens is those teams that get perfect scores, they see how they did it, and then they change the rules for next year so that they can't do what they did. When the teams figure out how to do it and they get a perfect score, different teams, it's not the same team, but like. there
What's
were
your
teams-
tiebreaker? If there's several with perfect
They
scores,
all get first place. There were two teams that got first place perfect score on every run.
really?
Yeah, so they both get first place. They both get a. And so they recalculated the score and they said, well, both of the teams will get a first place trophy and a plaque, whatever they get. So, but it was really neat. For the program being 2 years old, it's pretty impressive to get that far so quickly.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I'll make it.
I'll say that.
Properly moved and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Carries, we're adjourned.
Oh, yeah, there's.